So you want to grow plants and you live in an apartment or you live in a community where you can't use your own yard, or maybe you don't have a whole lot of space or you don't really know what you're doing, and somebody suggests to you, well, what about container gardening? Well, what about container gardening? Does it even work? Kind of. It does kind of work sometimes, but it doesn't never work, and it often doesn't refuse to work. It does kind of work sometimes. There are a lot of things to consider. Some plants in different climates just do better in containers than they do in the ground, like house plants. The reasons for that are that you can better fine-tune the moisture in the soil and the soil temperature and the amount of sunlight. It depends a lot on the type of plant that it is and what those plants' needs are. Now, if you are going to take a tomato plant and shove it in a container and try and keep it in a closet in your basement, it's probably not going to go that well. But if you were to do that with like a peace lily or whatever that is that they give out at funerals, it would probably live for a pretty long time without giving out, just because that's the nature of that plant. Tomatoes are heat loving and peace lilies don't care. It really boils down to the fact that when you have stuff in the ground, there are variables that you can't control, but you can kind of cater to those variables to give yourself the best possible outcome. When you are growing in containers, the variables are still there. There are more variables, and the amount that it can vary changes. So think of it like a seesaw. If you are growing in the ground, the fulcrum of your seesaw is not very big, it's pretty low to the ground, so you can only go so much. It can only vary so much side to side, right? Then you're growing in containers and your fulcrum's a lot higher, so you got a lot higher to go before you hit the ground on either side. There are so many variables: drainage, soil temperature, the location and how much sun it's getting. That's one of the benefits of container gardening, is that you can move it if it's getting too much or too little sun. But so many people just want to stick it in a pot and forget it. And then even more people who are in apartments and are container gardening don't have the option to move it somewhere else. It can kind of work sometimes. I certainly don't mean to scare you, and I certainly don't mean to imply that it can't ever work at all, because that's not true. Last year, I container gardened exclusively. I didn't have a blade of grass to my name, so I grew things on my patio, and they did grow, kind of, sometimes. I think I had a lot to do with it. If I had been more on top of it and not working all the time and gone all the time, I think it could have gone better. That being said, I don't mean to imply that you should not try container gardening. You absolutely should try to do it. A lot of people learn the fundamentals of gardening in some kind of container on their patio or their porch. Go for it. Absolutely do it, but know what you're getting into. Know that when you have a container, if it's a black Rubbermaid tote and you have it sitting in full sun, that is going to raise your soil temperature a lot. Your plant is not in the ground being insulated by the soil around it, by the moisture, and it's not. So please be mindful of the color container that you use, the amount of sun that you have. You can get a soil thermometer and check that kind of thing if you want to. Just know that that is a big problem, and so is drainage. Make sure that you have to find the right balance for each plant and for each soil composition to make sure that you're not losing too much water and that you're not losing it too slowly, causing things to get waterlogged. If I was going to be in the location that I was in last year and container garden again, I know that this year would have been a better year because I knew going through it last year what to expect. I also recommend that you play around with the different types of containers that you use. I've used Rubbermaid totes and poked holes in the bottom for drainage, and that's worked relatively well for things like potatoes. I've used scrap wood to make little planter boxes for my tomatoes, and that's done okay. I've used fish tanks that had cracks in them. I've used dresser drawers. Some of those worked better than others, believe it or not, because some of them just kind of fell apart. The bottom line is, you can garden where you are, even if it's something as simple as throwaway aluminum trays with fodder and microgreens in them. If you're interested in microgreens, Google it, look it up on YouTube. I might even do a little thing on it as we get into it, but microgreens and sprouts, you absolutely can container garden those. You can do that. But if you're looking to bite into a beautiful tomato that you've grown, it's gonna be a little bit harder fought battle than that for most people. If you have any questions about my experience with container gardening, make sure that you leave them in the comments section below, and make sure that you like and subscribe to get more videos like this. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you around. Bye.